Welcome to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Steep rent increases have spread across America like, dare I say, a pandemic? What's behind these big rent hikes? Then GRE's own Aundrea joins us as we discuss the pros and cons of you becoming a real estate agent today on Get Rich Education. You can get a 50-year-old house somewhere or buy a new one directly from the builder with tenant-resilient amenities already built in. With over 3,000 Florida units at different construction stages, they are exclusively for investors. President Wagner and Alaska and team also invest strongly in their own product. That's belief. Start at buildtorentdirect.com. That's build the number 2 rentdirect.com or text 407-927-5074. Hey, is your IRA in a real estate syndication? Yikes, a 37% UBIT tax could hit you, but you still have a chance to set up your eQRP and avoid this. Did you make too much money in 2020 and need more deductions? Now federal law lets you set up an eQRP in 2021 and get deductions for last year, retroactively. Even put old IRA and 401k money in Bitcoin, gold, or your own business. Get control of all of your retirement money, tax and penalty free. Text eQRP in all capital letters to 72,000.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from Hot Springs, Arkansas to Palm Springs, California, and across 188 nations worldwide. You're listening to one of America's longest running and most listened to shows on real estate investing, also with a strong dose of economics and wealth mindset. This is Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Home prices exploded. That began last year. I'd say they've had a better pandemic than home gym equipment. Renters thought that they would catch a break from that. Renters thought they'd steer clear of the price bidding war frenzy, but alas, it was not rent to be, because often there are rent bidding wars now. Yeah, rents are surging because of, well, a lot of reasons. First of all, there's an increase in the number of households this year. Yeah, understand that household count decreased last year when people that lost their service jobs moved in with their parents, for example. Rents are up due to more families being priced out of surging home values, like I discussed last week, and low supply. And rents are up due to inflation, and rents are up due to a home's increased utility value, since a home is increasingly now one's workplace and home. And record-setting equity positions in America actually contribute to soaring rents as well, like I discussed last week. And it did not take prescience to see this coming. No crystal ball was needed. Like I said here on the show months ago, this is a recurring cycle. What happens is that home prices run up first, and then rents soon follow. Well, a home price surge, that tamps down on your rent-to-price ratio. That hurts you on new purchases. But now a rent price surge, that tilts back more toward you, of course, the property investor's favor. Now, let's just say that in what we would call normal rent pricing conditions, like, say, where you're getting 4% or maybe 5% annual rent increases, what happens then is that your tenant often is not going to move out upon you serving them that notice that their rent is going up just 4% or whatever. They're most likely going to stay put if that happens. See, the street reality is that it's usually quite difficult for you to hike rents 10% or more in one fell swoop. You might get it, but that can more often upset your resident. They don't understand that. See, tenants, they don't care about inflation or national trends, and don't even try to tell your tenant that their rent is going up because the Fed is pumping liquidity into the market by buying $120 billion a month of treasuries and mortgage-backed securities. Their head will spin. They don't want to hear that. If you go for a 10% increase all at once, your tenant is often going to move out. That's because your existing tenant, even call them your longtime tenant, they are anchored to the recency bias. They know how much they paid to rent that same housing unit from you last year, so it's really difficult for them to swallow or stomach or internalize a big rent increase like that. But today, in this stepped-up rent environment, when a tenant vacates your unit, well, that's never good for you, but this news is not as sour as it usually is. Because now you can potentially get a huge rent increase. That's because between tenancies, it's easier for you to get the full measure of a 10%, 15%, or maybe even a 20% raise in rents. I've never gotten a 20% raise between tenancies, but it could be possible now. Big rent hikes are happening all over the place. The nation's capital has more than just capital appreciation now. Yes, Washington, D.C. rents are up 11%, not year over year, but just since January, they're up 11% in D.C. Metro Atlanta rents have surged 17% over the same month 1 year ago. It's not just residential, even demand for New York City parking spaces is soaring now. But yeah, it's residential rents that are sizzling nationally. We're seeing annual growth in places like Phoenix up 21% year over year, to Cleveland 16%, to Jacksonville's 12%, to Des Moines 11%, and nearly everywhere. This is real estate's space race, and this is what's happening. Those are some of the reasons why. And really what it is it's a reward to you if you've had to deal with annoying eviction moratoriums or other pandemic disruptions across your real estate portfolio. Well, as a real estate investor, would it help you to become a real estate licensee? Some people refer to that as being an agent. We're going to have an in-house chat today with our own Aundrea here at GRE, who has been a licensee for a few years. She had operated in Georgia and now Michigan, so we're going to get her perspective. Aundrea is really one of the more savvy and articulate real estate communicators today, and I've been so fortunate to have her here on Team GRE with me for over a year now. The world of being a licensee is really something that I don't know as much about as her. Just like a lot of times when real estate agents hear my show and they haven't come from the investment angle, my ideas have opened up really a whole new world to them, but I still have more to learn about being an agent. And understand that being an investor and being a licensee, they are two very different things. And being an investor, that doesn't take any formal credential, of course. But yeah, Aundrea is that rare combination of active investor and active licensee, where I'm only an investor. But I did take the real estate licensing test some years ago in Alaska. The test was difficult. I did pass it the first time, but I only passed it because I studied. And I feel like if I would not have studied, I would have failed. Around that same time, when I took the exam, my best friend did as well. He is an active real estate investor. He's really smart. He was the valedictorian of his class, and he took the exam and he failed it because he didn't study. Again, that helps point out that investing and being licensed are two quite different things. I'd say that less than 10% of the test that I took was about investing, like how to calculate a cap rate or questions about can you raise the rent in the middle of a lease term and things like that. I have never used a real estate license to show homes or represent buyers or sellers, so I really don't use it in the way that you would traditionally think about it. Really, the world has told me that they'd rather hear me discuss investing than do more traditional real estate representation activities. Now, someone that gets their real estate license is then known as a licensee, also known as a salesperson. In many states, but not all states, depending on the way that it's structured, that licensee is also known as an agent. And that means that they're an agent that works for the broker who owns the real estate firm. That's what that really means. Now, a realtor often plays that role too, but a realtor is also a member of the National Association of Realtors. I'll discuss that more with Aundrea before she comes in. Coming up down the road here on the show, we've got a lot of direct education coming from me, as always, some new guests on the show, and also the return of a few favorite guests. Longtime GRE contributor and friend Ken McElroy returns to the show with me soon. He's the Rich Dad Real Estate Advisor. You've probably read his books. Later on, that brilliant guy that meshes the geography angle with real estate, Peter Zion, returns here with us. Gosh, I love those shows. Being that geography degree holder myself, you've probably got this map pictured in your head each time I talk with Peter Zion. Is it worth it for a real estate investor to become a real estate agent? That's straight ahead. I'm Keith Weinhold. There will only ever be one, episode 362 of Get Rich Education, and you're listening to it. The people that our listeners can't stop talking about are Ridge Lending Group, NMLS 42056. They've provided GRE listeners with more loans than anyone, and it's where I got my last few loans. They finance single-family income property up to 4plexes. They're the number one lender for beginners and veterans. Start your pre-qualification, chat with President Chaley Ridge personally, and get your custom plan for expanding your cash-flowing portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com. A lot of investors choose either cash flow or home price appreciation, but one real estate market could provide both: Jacksonville, Florida. They've got 27% lower home prices and higher rents than the national median. Their market has appreciated 34% more than other comparable cash flow markets over the last 30 years. Get positive cash flow today and above average appreciation for tomorrow. They often have available inventory in Jacksonville, if you can believe that. Start at cashflowandgrowth.com.
This is Rich Dad Sales Advisor Blair Singer. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, and above all, don't quit your daydream.
Aundrea Newbern is with us. She runs operations here at GRE, helping book guests and so on. Aundrea, welcome back onto the show.
Thank you so much for having me back, Keith.
Now, you and your husband and your young son moved from Georgia to Michigan a few months ago, which is where you are now. And I know moving's always an interesting transition, but especially in this time of supply chain disruptions, you've had difficulty getting the most basic furniture for your home sometimes. So how is the move and how's the settling in going?
That's probably an understatement. So we kept our house in Georgia because we plan on kind of going back and forth. And so we left all of our furnishings there, which meant we need to furnish here in Detroit. And we didn't know there was such a supply shortage on furniture up here. We have been sleeping on our mattress on the floor since we got here in June. We have an 8-person kitchen table. We have a couch. We have everything we need except for bedroom furniture, which is what we actually want the most.
Yeah, sleep's kind of important. So thank you for being so attentive here in what might be an underslept condition if you were sleeping on a mattress on the floor for a little longer until you get your life up and running better there. Aundrea, you're a very active real estate investor. In fact, you are more credentialed than your host here. You have your MBA in finance. And really another credential that you have is your real estate license. So talk to us about your real estate license. We want to learn the pros and cons of having a license, especially for real estate investors. But just dropping back first, tell us about when and why you got your real estate license.
I started investing early 2016, and one of the biggest issues I had was finding, number one, an agent that responded timely, but number two, an agent that responded timely that also understood what an investor would be looking for in terms of properties.
Yeah, that's the
And then
rarity.
number three, actually, it is, yeah. And then actually having that person show up to get me into properties timely before they went under contract. So I got frustrated one day and I just said, I'm getting my license. That's it. I'm done. I'm going to be my own agent. I did. I got it pretty quickly. That was back in late 2018, so almost 3 years now. And I didn't even look into how much it cost or any of the other things that kind of came along with it. I just jumped in head first. I've learned both the pros and cons of it over the past few years.
Okay, that way you could get better access to deals in the MLS and things like that without having that intermediation of going through a licensee. You got that in Georgia, then, I would imagine, since that was late 2018 when you still lived in Georgia. What's it been like with reciprocity between Georgia and Michigan? Was that pretty flawless in getting that transferred over? Or did you have to take a test when you got to Michigan? Or how does that look?
That's still in process for me. There was no reciprocity in Michigan. So unfortunately, I had to go through the entire, salesperson training course again, which I'm just wrapping up now. And then I have to take the exam again. Many states do have that reciprocity, so you don't have to do that. But unfortunately, this was not one of them.
Yeah, that's kind of a pain. And a lot of times I know in these states, when you're a real estate investor and you're really into investing, a lot of times the things on both the exam and some of the continuing education that you have to do, they don't talk about those investor-centric things like cap rate or net operating income or capital expenditures or things like that. So I know sometimes it can be kind of frustrating taking that and getting credentialed. Now, are you a realtor or not?
I am a realtor, yes. In the state of Georgia right now, I am a realtor.
And for those that don't know, a realtor, that's actually a trademark, meaning that a person is a member of the National Association of Realtors. So being a licensee or an agent are somewhat different. And another thing that I can say about a realtor is it's not a realtor. It is a realtor, just like it's not a doctor. It's a doctor. So, Aundrea, you are a realtor, a member of the NAR. So now that you've had your license since late 2018, a few years now, talk about what some of those benefits have been, because we really want to learn, is it worth it, especially when it comes to getting in the deal flow?
I'll wait till the end to tell you my answer to is it worth it, but we'll start off with some of the pros that I've experienced. So the first one I mentioned is the quicker access to properties. I have direct access to the MLSs that I'm a part of, which means that number one, I get alerted on listings faster. I see realtor comments and additional information that, someone who is not licensed wouldn't be able to see in the MLS about specific properties. And I can let myself into properties and I don't have to wait on an agent to show those to me. So that's why I got my license. And I still think that's probably the biggest benefit of all.
In a hot market where things are really competitive, that quick access can really provide more of an advantage than it does even in a normal market.
It would, for the most part, I would say yes. I have found that now I don't even have to look at a property, or I don't have the opportunity to even try to get myself into a property. If something hits the market that I want to have to put in a contract immediately, there's no time to look at it. Things change a little bit. I think getting the access to that property first will be definitely a positive. But right now, I don't know that it is that much of a positive like it was, say, 6 months or a year ago even.
Being a licensee and even a realtor in your case, that does give you access to the MLS system, the multiple listing service system. Does that help you with off-market deals though at all? Or is it really only the things that hit the market where you'd really get any sort of advantage, if any?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is the properties that actually go on the market. The off-market properties are a different process for me to get to.
Okay, so maybe in a hotter market, maybe where there are more pocket listings, it's actually less of an advantage.
It can be, yeah. And with the pocket listings, that's a whole other thing we could go down the path of. But pocket listings are debatably not acceptable anymore under regulations, but they're still happening. They're still positive. Some of those properties that I'd want to get access to faster, if I'm quick, I can get into them and I don't have to wait on an agent. But in this hot market right now, it's a little bit less of a benefit than it was a year or two ago because people are putting contracts on properties right now sight unseen.
Yeah, it's probably best to avoid that side conversation about the pocket listings. And for those that don't know, a pocket listing is basically when a licensee learns about a property that a prospective seller has for sale, and they kind of keep that to themselves or their own tight network and then don't put it out there on the open market. Talk to us about some more of the benefits of having your license. Are there benefits with regard to networking with other realtors or access to any other resources that you wouldn't have otherwise, Aundrea?
The networking is key. There's lots of events. There are lots of local trainings, things where I can meet realtors and get to know them and also share with them that I'm an investor and let them know I'm actively buying properties. So that networking has really been key. And that's actually what's gotten me a lot of my deals.
That way, they've identified you as an investor. They might bring you deals sooner that way. Talk to us about any of the other benefits that you might have there, including the stream of income that you might have representing sellers and buyers, which is typically what one thinks of as a licensee doing.
I do represent both investors as well as your what we would call probably a retail buyer or seller, which is, friends and family, people that I meet that are selling their primary or buying their primary home. The majority of my business is with other investors that are looking to buy cash flowing long-term or short-term properties in that area. And that does bring in a sizable income. It's all depending on how much time you actually spend putting into setting up your systems and marketing and things like that. But even if you just put in a few hours a week, you can still typically make enough income off of that to offset some of the costs related to being a realtor.
And geography probably means less than it's ever meant in human history, but it still means something, and it's especially important in real estate. So with you recently moving from Brunswick, Georgia to Metro Detroit, how much of a disadvantage has that been? I mean, how much do you need to re-architect sort of your network and your deal flow and other agents that you deal with and so on?
I do it very, very part-time, right? And I only take on select clients because I work for the podcast and that's where I spend most of my time. But to your question, I have had to kind of reorganize the way that I do things because I'm not always in Brunswick, Georgia to be able to be the boots on the ground showing properties and things like that. I have people that I've partnered with in the area that help in terms of property management, that help in terms of letting clients in or taking videos of properties. And then I do kind of the, hey, here's what I recommend in terms of, is this a good deal for you? Do the numbers make sense? Let me write up your contract to make sure that I follow the process through and get you closed and get you everything that you want in terms of your contract. So it's having people there that can do kind of what I call the grunt work on the ground while I kind of do the oversight and the contracts and the relationship management.
Then there's something in the industry called a referral fee where you don't need to be intimately involved with the deal and you can get what's often 25% of the commission for referring a buyer to a prospective seller agent.
That is an option. I have not started doing that as of yet because, again, it's still hard to find other agents that understand what investors want and need. So I still do most of the work myself, but in markets where I don't operate, I absolutely can refer out and find somebody that's qualified.
What are your thoughts? In my experience, Aundrea, probably even more than 95% of real estate licensees really don't understand the language of real estate investing, and they really just cater to those owner-occupants that seek primary residences.
Absolutely right. A number could be even higher than that, Keith. I think there may be more than 95% that only cater to buyers and sellers of your traditional primary residence.
Yeah, I think there need to be more investor-centric licensees because, as we know, someone might only buy a primary residence every 7 years or so. And then investors that actually tend to be less picky about properties because they're not going to live in them themselves and they don't need to be the walls a certain color and the patio built a certain way. They tend to buy more often, and investors tend to be less picky as well. So oftentimes, if you can attract that investor client, you're in substantially better shape than if you deal with and cater with those seeking out a primary residence. Any other advantages of having your license, Aundrea, before we talk about some of the cons actually of having your real estate license?
One of my favorites is that when I'm purchasing a property myself, I can use my license as a bargaining chip. And what I mean by that is I have the option to be able to waive a certain amount of commissions every year with my brokerage. So if I'm coming into a property where there's multiple offers, or I want to make sure that I can kind of stand out in terms of my offer, in addition to offering top dollar if I have to, or, not asking for closing costs, I can also say, hey, I'll waive my realtor commission for you. And that's going to save you 3% of your purchase price on average.
So it is a bargaining chip that way. Those are some of the pros of obtaining and then maintaining your license. What about the downside? Are there some not so great reasons for having it?
One of the things I had mentioned earlier when we started talking is cost. So it's not free to get your license or to maintain your license. Depending on what market in, I pay a couple $1,000 a year in just my MLS fees and my board fees and things like that. You also have to pay your broker. So there's commission checks. Anybody that's bought or sold a house, you think, man, this realtor is making so much money right now. And a big chunk of that money actually goes back to your broker if you're not the broker. And then it also goes to taxes, right? So that's with anything, you're going to have to pay those taxes. But it's the maintenance costs, the licensing costs, and paying your broker on a monthly basis, usually for what they call like your desk fee or something like that.
Probably takes some planning because once a licensee gets the commission from a big sale, it all comes in one lump. And then they've got to split that with the broker, whatever the split is, and then pay taxes on that annually as well. What are common splits between a licensee and a broker? When a licensee works with that brokerage, does one often give up 50% of their commission?
50% to the broker would typically be a lot. I don't usually see that, but with some of your bigger brokerages out there, and I'll leave names off the table, with some of the big ones, you're typically paying about 30%. And some of the newer ones that have come in that are a little bit more technology oriented and don't maybe have as many office spaces, you're paying usually 20% of your fee for those, but it varies.
So it's still a pretty sizable chunk, not a 50-50 split. Any other downsides to having one's license other than the fact that they have to maintain it and pay fees and such?
There are. So one of the ones that have been a little bit key for me to have to work around and make sure that I'm complying with is, as a realtor, you're held to a higher ethical standard than just a typical investor. I have to disclose on anything and everything real estate related that I'm an agent. In the state of Georgia or the state of Michigan, there are certain things you have to be much more careful when you do in terms of working with wholesalers or things that I just would never have thought twice about before I became a licensed agent.
Yeah, I even have some Facebook friends that are real estate licensees. And at the bottom of any post that they make that has something to do with real estate, they have this little disclaimer that says something like, I am a licensed agent with Keller Williams or with EXP or whoever it is.
Yes, we have to do that. And then little things that I used to do, giving gift cards or even paying like a referral fee if someone brought me an off-market property. I can't do those things for non-licensed people anymore. So it's completely cut my ability to kind of offer those incentives for people to bring me deals. Can't do it.
That's interesting. It needs to be considered. Any last cons, any last downsides about one having the real estate license, specifically when they're looking to source real estate deals as an investor?
Yeah, it's your time. So you have to determine if the time that you're going to take to obtain the license and take all of those CPEs that you have to maintain, is that worth the time? If you're not doing a few deals a year at least, it's not going to be worth it. It's not worth your time or your money.
I've heard the statistic. It certainly varies by state, but something like licensees in some states tend to only average a salary of something like $12,000 from real estate licensed activities.
That's what the statistics show. And I would tell you that the majority of the people that I know that do real estate, they don't make very much money off of it. And maybe that's by intent and design. And maybe it's just because there's so many realtors out there right now, it's really hard to get the market share.
I think of it as a Pareto principle type of business where the top 20% are making 80% of the commissions, just like it really works in a lot of places.
That's right. Exactly.
So you mentioned, did you say CPE? So after you take and pass your test, is that part of the continuing education that you need to take? Is that annually or biannually? Or?
It depends on, I believe, what state you're in. So, in Georgia, I think you have to get 27 credits every 3 years. So it's not a very high barrier or bar to hit in some states, but in other states, there's more than that.
Yeah, I'm used to seeing something like 20 continuing education credits needed every 2 years or something like that in order for one to maintain their license, which makes sense in a lot of ways. You want a licensee to stay current, but really, again, when it comes to investors, it doesn't make sense overall because I don't think these continuing education sorts of tests that they have and these modules they have much to do for investors. Maybe they should make their own credential for investors or just get rid of the credential at all, one or the other.
I think that's a great idea, Keith. I haven't even thought about that.
The latter, getting rid of the credential, or the former in having a specific one for real estate investor agents?
I like the one specifically for real estate investor agents. That would make you a little bit more specialized. And then if that's what you want to focus on, you don't have to worry about all that other stuff that you don't really care about or need to know.
Can you give us an example of some of the things that they ask about on the test or something that's in your course module, whether that's something that applies to investors or something that doesn't? Because I don't think most of it does.
So it's been 3 years since I've taken an exam. So just going off of the limited memory I have of it, a lot of the stuff was related to different types of mortgages or what different types of holds are as far as purchasing property. It was stuff that was very generic. It wasn't specific to investments. And if you had worked in the mortgage industry like I did for many, many years, you already knew a lot of this stuff just from being in the mortgage industry. It was easy. It's probably the easiest exam I've ever taken.
That was the Georgia experience anyway.
That is correct. And I can't comment on Michigan because I have not taken it yet. So I don't know if that's harder, but I've heard it's quite easy as well.
What about the future? Is there anything that you plan on doing with your license in the future? How do you think you'll use it hereafter?
I definitely want to expand out and offer my services here in the Detroit area. I'd like to work with predominantly investors, same thing I do in Georgia. there's a lot of opportunity here in Detroit for investors. It's just very different than probably anywhere else you'll experience in the country. And I know, Keith, you and I have talked about some of the benefits versus the cons of being in the Detroit area in terms of buy and hold properties as well. But I do look at expanding that out and eventually at some point getting a team here.
Yeah, you have a number of 1 to 4 unit properties in the market that you moved out of in Georgia. And then, of course, Metro Detroit is an investor advantage market as well, at least as far as the numbers working from a ratio of rent income to purchase price. What do you think if someone came to you that's an active or interested real estate investor and they asked you if it's worth them getting the license? Would you recommend that other investors get their license then or not? Yes or no? What are your thoughts?
I can't do a yes or no. It completely depends. Are you going to be able to do 2 or 3 deals a year for yourself or for someone else? If yes, then it may very well be worth it. If you're not really going to do much with it and just kind of sit there in case you need it for something, you're wasting your time.
Any last thoughts when it comes to should an interested real estate investor get their real estate license or not, Aundrea?
I would really recommend just writing out what the pros and cons are for you and what you plan on doing with it and being very intentional. So if you know exactly why you want to do it, and if there's more benefits than there are cons to it, then go for it. Worst case, you hang your license up at some point or you let it lapse or you don't have to use it. You don't have to keep going forward, but at least make sure you're going to do something with it. Otherwise, you're wasting your time.
I think it's worth it if you're really going to pour yourself into it. The conventional wisdom about should one get their license casually or not is generally that you should not do it. For example, I've had different friends that have tried their hat on being a real estate licensee. One's a personal trainer / licensee. The other is a ski instructor / licensee. And they don't keep their license for very long. Either they completely go into it and get rid of the personal training or the coaching. They only stick with one or the other. What are your thoughts there?
I mean, it's hard. It is a real business. And to your point with the Pareto principle, the people that are very successful at it, they operate it like a business and they pour their heart into it. So you have to keep in mind, you're not going to be successful right off the bat. You're going to have to put a lot of effort into it in terms of marketing and building that lead flow before you ever start seeing money come in. So there's also a really long lag time on making money. And it's very hard to just do it on the side if you're planning on making real money at it.
To me, I think the fear at being what I would call a conventional licensee is that I don't want to go show properties on a Saturday to first-time home buyers that want to make a lowball offer on a condo and have my schedule disrupted, and they usually want to see something on short notice. Can one be a licensee without having to structure their lives that way?
The ones that I know that are able to do that, they're very successful. They've been doing it for a long time. And so they have a clientele built up that they can say no to if they need to. And then they have a team to be able to do the weekend showings for them and the late showings. The answer is no. When you start off at first, you're going to have to give up your time and you're going to have to work those weird hours to be able to build that book of business.
Right. Yeah. If you're going to get your license, depending on how you do it, yeah, you might not be taking your next vacation until the year 2025. So
that's right.
Progress carefully there. Aundrea, if someone wants to reach out to you to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can reach out to me. I'm on Bigger Pockets if you're looking to connect. So you can just find me, Aundrea Newbern, on there. You can also find me on Facebook. I have both a realtor page as well as, a personal page that I respond to. You can also reach me at Aundrea at getricheducation.com, and my name's spelled a little bit oddly. So that's AUNDREA at getricheducation.com.
Aundrea, it's been valuable. Thanks for taking us through the pros and cons of having your real estate license.
Thank you so much, Keith.
Yeah, great concise material from our own Aundrea that runs operations here. Gosh, she's great. And, she really makes my life easier. If I'd sum it up in one sentence, either be a real estate agent full-time or not at all. There's not much of a great gray area or middle zone there. I've long felt that with turnkey property, others are out there finding the great properties for me or turning them in to investor advantage properties for me. Often the same is with using syndicators. No, I don't feel like I'm paying a premium for properties that way because I'm not the one paying for it with my time by being on the hunt and then coordinating with a lot of contractors and other specialists too. I like the convenience of others basically bringing me that vessel, that vehicle that durably provides me with all 5 profit centers. I kicked off today's show by discussing the rapid rate of rent appreciation in the United States and how it's jumping up multiples faster than historic norms. Until next week's show, check out our YouTube channel. That's where I discuss directly with you how to optimize today's rent increase climate. I've been discussing rents a lot lately on Get Rich Education YouTube. Thanks to Aundrea Newbern today. I'll see you back here next week. I'm Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.